as Cornell said, we first met. I wasn't an ordained Buddhist monk. I was just someone on a search to find what fit for me as a spiritual practice. My traditional family religion sort of fell apart for me. I was Catholic for 62 years, and but I was trying all kinds of things. I was trying some Hindu. I was trying Kabbalah, Jewish practice. I was ready to move into some Muslim practices, and I wasn't finding anything that I was looking for. And then that evening that we met at the Cathedral of Hope for this Lenten practice of meditation, felt really comfortable. I had been doing meditation for probably 10, 12 years before that. I have a good friend who is also a long ordained monk. He went to Japan when he was 16 and became a monk in Japan. And so I call him my teacher. And he was also instructing me in meditation. And right now I'm in the Mahayana tradition, which is similar to Thich Nhat Hanh. The Mahayana is considered the newer school, but don't ever tell the Theravadins that, because they're considered the old school. And the Mahayana tradition came about 300 years after the Buddha took his leave of this world. And the Mahayana tradition is different in a few ways, but not many. And as Cornell said, I have a small temple in Arlington, Texas called Budding Dharma Temple. And yes, you know what? I've stolen some stuff from here. We do the Brahma Viharas after meditation, anything that fits, anything that feels comfortable. For me, everything that's musical and beauteous, I steal. And so you'll find that my Western tradition in my temple is a conglomeration of a lot of different things. Some things that I've found in Vietnamese temples, some things that I've found in Chinese or Chan temples. So my Buddhist name is Tuc Minh Tien. Min means bright. It's a Vietnamese word. Tien means meditation. So my name is Tuc, which means monk, master or teacher, and bright meditation. When I first started this with my original teacher, I was in a Japanese Zen tradition. And I wasn't in robes at that time, but I wore something called a wagesa. It's almost like a stole, like Catholic priests wear. And my Buddhist name then was Zen Kai. Again, bright meditation. So it follows me wherever I go. This evening, I'd like to chat with you just a little bit about some things that I've been chewing on in my own mind. And I sort of entitled it Control, Choice, and how does all that play into equanimity? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that this evening. But before I talk about those issues, I'd like to tell you a story. And the story comes from the Tao. You all know what the Tao is? Tao tradition. Yes, it comes from that. And that existed back in India with the Buddha. That was he was familiar with it. Sometimes this story is attributed to the Buddha told it. I can't find any place, I'm not looking real hard either, in any of the sutras or the Dhammapada where the Buddha actually said this story, but I like the story, and so I thought it'll fit where I want to go with this topic. And it's the story called, Is This So? Or Is This So? And it's a story about a farmer. And it was a farmer who was struggling with his own life. He'd lost his wife early on. He had a young son, and he and his young son were working their farm together and trying to put together some crops so that they could live and eat, maybe sell a few to make a little bit of revenue in their life. And they also had one horse. And this horse they kept in a corral outside of their home. And the son was responsible for the horse being corralled at night. They left him out in the fields during the day, but at night they put him in the corral. And so one morning when the farmer woke up at the crack of dawn, he went out and there the gate of the corral was left open and the horse was gone. Whose fault was that? Oh, you're all such non-blameless people. It was the son's fault. It was his responsibility for closing that gate, and he didn't do it, and the horse got loose. Well, over a course of a few days, all the neighbors heard about the missing horse, as small communities share information or gossip. And they all kind of came back to this man's farm and they said, "Oh, you poor human being, you poor farmer, your son is so careless. And now you've lost your horse. You'll have no way to plow your fields and your crops will not be productive for you for this year." And the farmer listened to all of that and he said, "Is this so?" And he left it at that. He didn't punish his son. He didn't really think much about it. It was just something that had happened in life. About a week or 10 days later, the farmer got up and they had been struggling, trying to work their farm, just he and his son. And he hadn't bothered to close up the corral again. And lo and behold, that morning, there was the horse back in the corral. And the horse had found some friends. He'd gone out and made friends with about half a dozen other horses. And he probably told them in horse language, I don't know how that goes, but he said, "Come on back to my corral. They feed us really well and they give us water and food and take care of us." And now the farmer had 7 horses. So after a couple of days, the neighbors had heard this and they again gathered around to view this corral filled with 7 horses. And they said to the farmer, "Oh, you fortunate, lucky man. Now you've got 7 horses, 7 times your original wealth has been created here. And now your son will take, I'm sure, great responsibility for these 7 horses and everything will be wonderful in your life. And you will be prosperous." And the farmer listened and he said, "Is that so?" Didn't say anything else. That was it. The next day, the son decided that these new horses needed to be broken. And so without telling his father, because he wasn't asking for advice, he just went out to the corral and he hopped on one of the nearest horses to break it. And that horse had other ideas. And he threw the young man and threw him in such way that he broke his leg. Well, the neighbors heard about this also. And they came back to share their wisdom with the farmer. He said, "Oh, you poor man. Your son now has a broken leg. He can't assist you in the fields anymore. And now you won't be able to get the crops that you thought you were going to have. And now you've got 7 horses to feed. Oh, this is just terrible that this happened." And the farmer looked at them and heard what they said and said, "Is that so?" Said nothing else. Well, in their township or in their area of living, the king was having a war. And to have the war, he had to go out and he had to collect all the young men to come and fight in his army. And he came to the farmer's house to catch his son, make him a soldier in this army. But the king looked at this son and said, "Well, he's got a broken leg. What good is this guy going to be in my army?" So he didn't take the son. I'll bet you know what happened next. All the neighbors came back and said, "Oh, you fortunate man. He's come and taken all of our young men into his war, but you still have your son living at home. And after his broken leg heals, he will be there with you and working. And we don't know what's going to happen to our sons." And the farmer said, "Can you guess?" Who wants to guess? All together.
Is that so?
Absolutely. Is that so? So what is the point of this story? It kind of falls into this idea of how we could try to control our lives and how we have choices and how we choose some of the controls we have. And we try to control some of the choices we have in our lives. In our controls, how many people have controls in your life? You do. How many drove here? Were there any red lights on your way here? That's a control in your life. How many took the choice to stop at the red lights? Yeah, you had choices, but you could have chosen to run an amber light, try to go through. Not a good practice, but you could have chosen to do that. So controls and choices kind of play off of each other. I remember my first awareness of my control issues, and I had a few in my life. I worked for American Airlines for 33 years. It's a very precise type of industry, if you will. My responsibility was to write policy and procedure for airports and airport personnel. And that developed later on into writing procedures for security for both the government and my airlines. And I got to tell you, I had to be pretty controlling with that. Because when the FAA came out and they saw that my people working on the ramp weren't doing it according to how it was supposed to be done, they assessed fines to the airlines. And those fines were quite costly, sometimes upwards of $250,000 to $500,000 for one offense. My responsibility then was to make up some kind of BS that would tell the government that we're going to fix all of this. We're going to make it better. Please don't fine us this kind of money. Why did I do this? Why did I make up this? It wasn't all BS. We were actually going to do some of it. But why did I have to do that? Because I didn't want to lose my job. Because believe me, the president, if he saw on my department that we were losing, $3, $4, $5 million in a quarter, he'd take notice of that. And so I became very controlling with the people that worked for me. I was in relationships for most of my life. Relationships where in relationships there's a give and take. But guess who was the controlling factor in my relationships? Me. I felt I had to control it. And how did I learn how to do that? I learned it because that's what I saw when I was raised. My mother was a very controlling woman. My brother and I would often laugh that Mom didn't even have to say any words. She gave us what was called the Zimmerman eyes. And when we saw the Zimmerman eyes, we knew we were in trouble. She didn't even have to speak. She was in control. My father was a very submissive person in his life. I think he did it to try to not get my mother upset about anything because it wasn't pretty when she was. But I learned this control factor. I watched my mom use it, and it became part of how I use it in my relationships, all in a way that was not healthy for any of the relationships that I was in, which is why I'm not in any of them today. Okay. So control played this part in my life. We all have these issues of control, of an awareness of us wanting to put our lives, how we see us, in a little box and make that little box work. How many of you have control issues? Yeah, absolutely. Some of the simple ones. Tell me a control issue you might have. Go ahead.
In my work, I wish the people I work with show up. Well, want them to come,
Okay.
right?
But what do you do to control that?
Tell them, hey, if you don't do this, I have to do this.
Is that enough? Do they show up because you,
No,
oh, okay.
sometimes, yes.
Sometimes, yes.
But sometimes no, but I prefer not to do that.
Try it. Next time you don't show up, you're fired. It works so much better. Who else was gonna share? Yes, sir.
I wish I had better control over my reaction. I feel like by practicing mindfulness, I've gained the ability to control them better. But for example, I've been quitting nicotine for the past week,
Uh-huh.
so I'm about ready to throttle everyone.
You get a gold star.
Oh, okay, yeah. But yeah, I've come very close to manslaughter multiple times this week. But normally it's stayed inside. But there was this one coworker who was coming up to me and he was asking me this question about a MacGuffin. It doesn't matter, but it was something people were asking me about and it had been annoying me all week. And I just I snapped at him and I really regret that. I'm gonna go apologize to him on Monday, I think. But it's not so much that I'm glad that I can recognize that issue and I'm gonna take some action about it. It's just more the increasing that awareness of yourself. That way you can almost detachedly watch yourself. But even that's kind of control freakish, ain't it?
Sure is. Yeah, they're intertwined. Our choices and our controls are intertwined. What we choose to allow us to either control or be controlled by is one thing. How we choose to react to being controlled or how we control is another thing. So they're intertwined, they're interconnected. Who else would have one? Yes, in the back.
Like health, meaning like mindfulness is I try to micromanage them because I don't want to feel worse and probably give myself more anxiety in doing so. I mean,
Right. Now, I would like to take that one because it demonstrates what is the difference between what we might call good control versus what I was doing with some of my employees, which was bad control. You have good intention for the control you try to impart in eating habits. How many have children or grandchildren or deal with young people? Do we let them eat whatever they want, whenever they do? Can I come and live at your house?
Very tenacious.
Yeah, okay. But for good health, we're trying to make a balanced diet for people that we are responsible for. Those choices might be considered better choices than just allowing freedom of letting them choose what they want, exercising some control in what they want. I mentioned earlier that the reason that I'm chewing on this concept quite frequently lately, and part of it is, and I talk about this, I think almost every time I come, is I am involved, as you all are, whether you're realizing it or not, in the 5 remembrances. The 5 remembrances are taught in this Buddhist practice, and the very first one is, I'm of the nature to grow old, and there's no way to avoid growing old. No matter what type of control, no matter how many times I go to the gym, no matter what I choose to do, I can't slow this aging process down. But I can make some choices that are a bit better than some other choices that I could make in this aging process. But there's no way to control it exactly, totally. The other remembrance is I'm of the nature to get sick. There's no way to avoid being sick. How many of you practice things like, well, take COVID, for example. How many of you wore a mask during COVID? I did. Yeah, it may seem to make sense. They're telling us now that it wasn't as foolproof as we might have been led to believe, but it was a choice. It was a control that was good. I was trying to control being sick. How many of you have had COVID? Yeah, I've had it 3 times. So all the preventions that we try to put in place, I can't avoid getting sick. The third one is one that none of us likes to think about very much, is I'm of the nature to die. And there's no way for me to avoid death. Now, I don't know how many people you know, but I know some who spend a lot of time trying to avoid the concept of death. People will actually come into my temple and talk about fear of death and how could they remove the fear of death. I can work with them to remove the fear of death, but I can't remove death. Everybody is going to die. There's no way to avoid death. It's quite amazing. The Buddha, he had a unique way. There's a quick story about a woman who'd lost her child and was beyond herself in grief with the loss of the child. And she believed greatly in the powers of the Buddha. And she came to him and she said, I know that if you want to, you can restore life to my son. And the Buddha didn't say, I can't. The Buddha only said, okay, well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to every house in the village, and I want you to bring back the person or persons that you can find that have never experienced death in their personal life. And the woman went running off thinking, I'll find somebody, knocking on all doors. Do you think she found anybody? She didn't, because death affects us all. This third one is one that, again, we don't want to, or fourth one that we don't want to think about. And that is everybody I have in my life, I've had in my life, everybody that I love, all the things that I love, my puppy dogs, which I've got to tell you, they live a better life than I do. We're all going to deal with impermanence and death. We're all going to be removed from life and from each other. We're going to experience it, and there's no way to avoid it. There is absolutely no way to avoid it. No matter what choices we make, no matter what controls we try to put into our life, we're not going to be able to avoid that. And then finally, the last one is my actions are my only true belongings. There's no way to avoid the karma of my actions. It's the ground on which I stand. So the thoughts that we have, the words that we use, the actions that we take part in our life along this path that we call our life, has elements that are going to occur in which we wish we hadn't said it, we wish we hadn't done it, we wish we hadn't thought it. Guess what? There's no way to avoid the karma of that. You might not specifically experience the karma, but what we send out will have a reaction somewhere, somehow, some way. That, don't tell people who'll get fired. There's no way to avoid the karma of those actions. And so again, we have choices and we have controls, but there's no way that we really can control those elements of what we call life. So the last part of this that I'd like to talk about is the term equanimity. How do we deal with these things and choices and controls in our life? Things that we like, that we don't like, that we try to change, that we can't change. How do we deal with that? The Buddha tells us that there's a way of dealing with all of life, even the 5 remembrances, okay? Even those things, dealing with thoughts of death, and sickness, and old age, and impermanence, and the karma of our actions. The way to deal with it is to understand what, and we said it in one of the viharas, upeksha, or equanimity. What do we think that is? It's a difficult concept once you start to walk on it, but once you begin to practice it, it becomes easier and easier to do. And what it actually is in relation to what the Buddha found when he came through his awakening. Okay. Remember how the Buddha lived? The Buddha lived with choices. The Buddha lived with controls. He was a rich, rich prince, and he thought he had everything he wanted, but he still wasn't happy. And no matter how his father and family tried to control his life, they couldn't bring him around to wanting to be the king that he was planned to be. And so he took choices. He left the palace and he decided, I'm going to go and I'm going to be a student. I'm going to study under the greatest teachers of his time. And I'm going to get answers to some of the things that he saw when he went out to the outside world. Old age, death, sickness. While he was out, he also saw something called mendicants. Mendicants were people that were trying to find it in different ways. Much like I told you, I tried to find my spiritual path in many, many different ways. It was difficult for me because I couldn't find what fit. The Buddha couldn't either in the schools of learning, the high Vedic schools that he went to. He couldn't find it there either. So he decided he'll try it with the mendicants. The mendicants did really kind of what today we would view as strange things. You know, they didn't wear many clothes if they wore clothes at all. They kind of, did strange things like wash with dirt, lay on beds of nails, beat their bodies with bushes and thorns to try to put the body into control. The Buddha did all of this. As a matter of fact, he did it to such an extent that he was on the verge of death from living this life of being a mendicant. He had, I don't know, a certain number of mendicants who were in his groupings, if you will. And of course, then his awakening happened. And the awakening, yes, it occurred when he sat under the Bodhi tree. That's a big tree. He sat under there and he said, I'm not going to move till I find the answers to the questions I want. But I think he really found it in the young cattle girl who brought him food and said, oh, silly man, why are you killing yourself? That's so silly. Eat some food, eat some porridge, have some milk. And the Buddha had an awakening at that moment that he saw that the life he lived before wasn't smart, wasn't the way. And the life he was living now wasn't the way. In fact, he didn't have much longer to go in that life if he continued. And then he found his awakening in what we call the middle way. Not too much of this, not too much of that. A balance in your life. And how can you get these balances in your life? Through choice, some control, and a practice that serves you, a practice that supports you, a sangha, a community that holds you dear to their hearts, as the people in this room, whether you recognize it or not, just being here is your indication that that's the type of people that you are. The people that come to my temple, it's smaller than this, but I manage 15 to 20 people on my services, and they begin to talk to each other like dear friends. They care about each other. When one is sick, they call them, they check on them. They're willing to do things for them, drive them to the doctors. This is just from a group of people that come together to sit, to chant, to sing songs. Thank you, Bobby. That's another thing that I stole is some of Bobby's love of music. And that is the joy of this life, and that is the joy of your choices, and that is the joy of your controls. If you have enough control in your life to set aside 10 minutes a day, it doesn't have to be more than that, to sit quietly, allow yourself this beautiful gift of meditation and the practice of mindfulness, I can't see how your life wouldn't change. My impression would be it will change for the better, but that's up for you to decide. But it's a great practice, but you gotta have some controls and you've gotta have choices. You've gotta control that, the kid's gotta quiet down so you can have those 10 minutes. Maybe have a little place that's just your own where you can sit in quiet and understand it. Maybe do a little bit of reading to understand a little bit better what this great teacher, the Buddha, brought to us. But there's other great teachers in the world as well. Read a little bit of Jesus. He brought you some great stuff as well. Read a little bit about Muhammad. He brought some great stuff as well. All the great stuff that the great teachers brought has only been screwed up because we people get involved and create things that sort of misinterpret what the teacher actually was trying to tell us. So use your choices, use your controls. If they don't feel quite right, if you begin to feel like you're out of balance, go to your practice of equanimity. Just sit with your breath. I always tell the people at my temple, let your breath be your rock. Let it be your anchor to your life. It works all the time. I'm teaching now at a senior center called Active in Arlington, this great big $1 million places that they put together. And in Active, you got to be 50 or older, so none of you are eligible. And they hold all kinds of things, swimming, exercise, and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, reading their schedule, I thought, let me just offer. So I put out an offer and I said, I'm willing to come and just give an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours a week just to offer the concept of how to meditate, how to practice mindfulness. And they took me up on my offer. The very first week I was there, I had 2 people. This last Tuesday, I had 22. And of the 22, 3 of them came to my temple Thursday night, looking for more deepness. So in generosity and in putting ourselves out there in compassion to this world, we can change it. The Buddha's greatest teaching, I think, was don't worry about what happened in the past. Don't spend a lot of time thinking about what's going to happen in the future. Spend time right here and now, because this is the only place where life actually exists.
Thank you, Thay. So we've got some time, so I wonder if part of our community sharing might be on small group sharing in groups of maybe 4 or 5 people. You can find people around you to share with, and I think some ideas could be on Thay's talking about control and choice. Is that so? These times when life reminds you that life is happening right now. So go ahead and do that. We have about 10 minutes. And so, and maybe if Jay can set up a breakout room for those online. And then I'll sound the bell when you have a few minutes left. Doing a Sunday out for a church is bad stuff, meditation practice. You'd like the agenda. Like, okay. Sit down and shut up. No.
I think this thing's.
Story on this. Senior vice president is in charge of it. I feel like I know that's possible. That's
I don't know what's easy to do. So, the place that I first read that, it's also- It's great book. It's also-
I'm thinking, what 600 is? It's crazy. I said,
I don't know, to me, I focus less on the puzzle.
you like what I've done so far?
Because on one hand,
No,
yeah,
I got
I
six.
realized
I
it's
got
like,
like
I don't
two.
really have it.
So I went home to the wheelchair. And I gave her a script.
Yeah.
At the beginning. And then- I wasn't doing that job much longer. What was the script? It was customer service. It was a scenario.
Oh,
Customer service.
You know,
1 month.
Right.
How you do it. Yes.
There's also people that. People.
Right.
Then either.
Making stories.
Yeah.
My corporate life, which, I've always been kind of, well, yeah, I don't need to go into all that, but I'll just say, my day today was dealing with what went wrong in the moment. I've always had this job, if you're doing your work, no one notices because things are flowing. But when something goes, then it's like, it's their fault because they finally noticed.
Right.
It's there. So those are always, but it was always a day to day. And I would be given those things like a review time, hey, everything's great and all that, but we need to see more, exactly what you said, like more things in planning and all these things. But
You're not suggesting.
so what's gonna happen today and who's, so kind of similar, it's like, and where do you play the game? Or how do you make up something that is honest and true and say, well, my plans are to go home at 5 rather than being the one who stays until 9 or 10 at night because something that isn't in my job description, the fire alarm, right? It's like, when in my engineering degree did I handle sitting at an unlocked door waiting? But still, how do we exist or how do we live honestly?
Where the farmer did.
Yeah. I think I am exerting a lot of control in similar to what y'all are talking about. Y'all are talking about dealing with corporate mandates that are coming down on you and, silly things that they're asking you to do. I'm like, I didn't do that tonight. Like, trying very hard to go the rest of my life without working for a major corporation. I'm trying to work for smaller businesses if I can. I know that might not be realistic in the long term. But I think that's one of the ways that I'm trying to control everything. I worked for a bigger corporation about a year and a half ago. And I just got up I was angry every morning. Well, I wasn't angry. I'd go in and I'm like, what am I gonna get yelled at about today? Because I don't even know what they're gonna be mad about. It's always something. And I don't know, I think now I'm just trying to avoid getting into a job scenario like that again, where there's always a new thing. If people are looking at numbers, but they're not actually looking at your job and how you're doing your job. I found that to be a very challenging and don't do well in that environment. So I'm doing the best I can to avoid it. Yeah.
There has to be a. There can be a wall between.
Right. Yeah, just like, right.
Sort of chuckle, not that you're gonna take all these.
Right.
Not letting. Realization.
Right.
But at the end, God really is like a question.
I couldn't, I called me. Are you kidding? Do you know what I do? Apparently not. They said, we know what you made.
Yeah.
No, I love that you brought up.
Right. Yeah.
It's like Joe is like. I can think of.
Poured shots all night long. Got a little drunk, and then the next thing I realized was he
Just keeps making him suffer.
this joke, he's not, he could go to work and so on.
From my perspective,
What do you got?
And that was great. Finally did get around to letting me go. USAir. Now we had two. We could hire.
you and I kind of had to think.
They tried to make it like.
Yeah, we kind of, oh, that's that.
Right.
But to a certain degree, it's different. Chinese villagers coming down to us, are you black?
Yeah.
Realize what was.
Well,
Why was I working?
Equanimity
Right.
is talking about.
Funny.
So you say.
I'm retired.
That last bit had reminded me, there was, this was some years back, not all that long ago, but maybe 7, 8 years ago. And, I had been self-employed for a while then, but there was someone who used to work for me when I was director of engineering. But he worked for me, that he called me, he said,
Like, for example.
I did a proposal to a company for this package, software package, and he said, what do you know, they accepted my proposal, now I have to do it. And he said, I need someone who can manage and write code. And he said, I thought of you on it, and he said, so are you interested to probably? And that's it. I said, well, perhaps this sounds interesting. I'm not looking for a career. I'm here for the paycheck. Me too. Let's go.
Marriage made in heaven.
Yes, but we had to play these little games. We were watching, we were a team of, I don't remember how many, but at the time, I made like 3 people and stuff like that. So we were trying to. One of the daily reports, the progress, and it's like we were developing along, it's like the way things work, it's like you don't incrementally do everything along the way. It's like, well, what will make them go, yes, that's exactly what we're looking for. That's 90% done. What happens behind the scene, actual process. But we didn't dare tell them that we found done. And so it's like we were fudging, not fudging, but we just trying to do this work. It's weird, but lastly, on that, I was thinking, when I was in the other job, it kind of changed. I think it's probably more so now, maybe you dealt with this too, where you were, each of the people who was in the department was hours on the director or manager's stretch. We need to put 5 hours on this project. I have these employees. Here's 5 hours to slide in into Microsoft project or whatever it is. And those of us who are really able to pay people who are like, thank you for that way. You can't put Sue as an hour for this when her knowledge is really fits to be these things. So anyway, dealing with that, I always think, what if I had this transfer stuff? And then when I look at it, it's like, well, it probably changed things, but exactly as I said, I learned to separate things. Well, but is that so?
It sounds good.
So-
And also that's. I'll get back with.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember.
Right, most of the time, yeah. Or you give, that's 20%.
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
Like, all right, I'll work the farm alone. All right, we'll work the farm alone. Kind of just do it when we can.
Take 2 more minutes.
And Entire museum. Serenity. Actually, that is it. It's kind of hard to move the temple too, so it's give it up.
You live at the temple? Oh, okay. Yeah.
The front of the house was former living room.
Right.
It's about it's one side of that.
Yeah.
My choice.
Yes.
Sangha told me Thursday night, they said, part of being a Sangha is that we could come in and clean the temple. And I said, are you telling me that the monk is a slob? Just walk away and finish service. Knock yourself. Stuff on the curb. It's great.
Picture of 1-800 got jump to show up at our house.
Right.
Let's say it's another.
I thought it was all about belongings and poor entertaining joke.
I know. When I do this, maybe we can do like 5 minutes. We like to have like 10 till. So I'm gonna ask them, anything
They have
to share
questions.
they have, and if there's a question, we might take 1 or 2.
Okay. By the way, that's called a ink.
Yeah. This is, I've never pulled this one out of the drawer. This one just goes. Yeah, I'm aware of it.
30 seconds.
But if I just said that word here.
Somebody's trying to exhibit control here.
Is it so?
You have a choice. Let's see, move this around this. So why don't we take just maybe 3 minutes and maybe a couple of people share maybe what was said in your, or what you talked about in your group, or if you have a question for Thay Z, and how much clock so that we just, maybe 3 to 5 minutes. So you want to share what was in the group or a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Talk about like divinity, how we control various things in our life, but then like pausing to like let things go, but then also not letting something go too much so that you're like an emotion, letting it go and run wild, ruminating in it, like knowing when to like hopefully breathe through it and let it go. How that well, this is really hard. But
Very nice, thank you. So go ahead, Jim.
One thing we talked about was how to handle the part of like being the farmer who, this is so, this is so, this is so, this is so, versus experiencing normal human emotions of being happy that you have 7 horses, being sad that you lost a horse, being sad that your loved one is really hurt. That would be really tough for me to live in such a state of equanimity that my loved one suffers a broken leg and I'm just, oh, that is so. That doesn't sit right with me. So where is the line between being so into an equanimous
Sure.
state?
Easy for you to say.
Not really. Where's the line between just living in a state of complete equanimity versus suppressing emotions?
First of all, I would encourage you to just choose a different words. Is this so? Is what the farmer said, not this is whatever you were saying. There's a difference to it. As is this so? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. That response in and of itself has the balance to that. You know, our emotions, ladies and gentlemen, are ever present. Thank you that they are. Don't we love some of our emotions? The emotions to love, to laugh, to cry. All of those things are just wonderful emotions. It's when they get out of control that we have to make different choices to be able to see those emotions for what they are, impermanent. And is it really the way I'm seeing it? And that's what the farmer was saying in every one of those cases. Neighbors were telling him this. Is this so? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Does that help?
I saw Neil had a hand up. We go, and then we'll finish with that.
Brought up middle way, and I was questioning because kind of pointed out at one point that like her choice for health was good, whereas some are bad choices that I sometimes like I was looking at, you know, you and I have similar issue, well, similar thing. So I've been single for 30 years, and you know, a lot of that is to protect myself, but it also, so I'm in control, but it's also from a woman screaming at me and telling me, make stuff or whatever, make the bed. But yet I'm also lonely for not having another person in my life. So is there really a middle way? There's really like a good and a bad choice. I don't know.
Well, Neil, I think we could all agree that good and bad are always there. There's not just one. One does not exist without the other. And so what I'm hearing from you is just that the middle way that you are in right now, as we're describing, or as you were describing, is not the middle way you want. So make a change. Change it to what you do want. You want companionship and somebody to be in your life. Make a choice. It doesn't have to be a big choice. It's little choices. This is how we live our lives, people. Hopefully, rather than make these huge choices that, oh my God, how do I get out of this now? Choice. We want them to be ones that are more in central middle way, which is what I think the Buddha was talking about. Not trying to see, well, this isn't quite what I want. Okay, change. Make a change. If that change doesn't work, make another change.
Yeah, there was one teacher we had that had talked about, she compared it with the edge of the bell. She said, we're living our life walking on this rim of the bell. Sometimes we tip a little this way and we make a little change. Tip a little bit that way. To me, that was a really wonderful visual. Worked for me.
Sometimes we fall in.
Yep, yep. And we are all of the nature eventually. So anyway, so thank you, everyone. And thank you again, Thay Z.